La Nina is gone, but what's to come? I am Mark Sponsler, and welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast for the week starting Sunday, May 4th. Stormsurf, waves, weather, buoys, altimetry, snow, temperatures, El Nino, weather analysis, essential data for outdoor people, all the time, no hype. If you like the video, give us a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Click the Stormsurf icon down in the lower right-hand corner of the screen. If you have a comment or question, write it up down below. We'd be happy to hear from you. And if you'd like to make a small contribution to the cause, you may hit the super thanks button down below, the heart with the dollar sign in it. With that, I'd like to thank the folks that donated last week. Our Predicament, Coach Nate, B. Nadine, O. Dillard, Evolution Moto. Most of these are longtime contributors. And a call out to Leona Roberts. I mangled her name last week and called her like Leonard Roberts or something, so I do apologize for that. Leona and I have communicated many times in the past, and it's always a pleasure talking with her. With that, let's get to work. We'll start by looking at significant wave heights around the planet. In the North Pacific, low pressure is generating 15-foot seas, but of no real interest. You also see local pressure gradient along the California coast, also generating 15 or better foot seas, making for just a mess of conditions there. In the southern hemi, a gale developing off of New Zealand with 24, maybe 25-foot seas pushing off to the north, and remnants of some other systems producing 20-foot seas, but of no real interest. In the North Atlantic, nothing going on. South Atlantic, nothing going on. Indian Ocean, gale under Australia with 30-foot seas, but all aimed off to the south. Another little gale trying to get developed. Looks like it's pushing off to the north with like 29-foot seas, something like that. So for now, the pattern fully looks like it has shifted to the south. But before we get into all that, we will start by looking at current conditions. We're going to look at the buoys starting up off of Oregon at the intersection, Columbia River there between Washington and Oregon. Grays Harbor buoy number 036. We're looking at all the energy that's hitting that buoy identified in feet by period bands, 33.3 second period here at the top end of the chart. Very high energy swell, which, as no big surprise, there is literally 0.0 feet. The whole way down to 5 second period, that'd be just like pretty much unrideable wind chop. You're looking at, what, a third of a foot or something like that. But where you see the bumps, that suggests there's some swell here in between 16 and 18 second periods, and then some mixture of wind swell between 11 and 9 seconds. Let's see how well the algorithm does. All it does is pick up the primary swell, 4.4 feet at 10.4 seconds from 271 degrees. That would make surf at about chest high, and yeah, that's about what it looks like. Then we go down to Northern California, the Point Reyes buoy, buoy number 029, there off of Point Reyes, just north of the Golden Gate Bridge. Same sort of profile. You see bits of small energy, but just massive amounts of wind swell. Anywhere from 12 seconds down to 9 seconds. You can kind of lump it all together in one big bag. Primary swell, 12.9 feet at 10.1 seconds. From 318 degrees, that's pretty north, theoretically making surf at 13 feet. But the San Francisco Bay Area, all that is shadowed by Point Reyes and Farallon Islands. So maybe half that energy is actually getting in. And then secondary energy, 8.8 feet at 6.8 seconds from same thing, 316 degrees, and that makes 6-foot surf, but again, only about half of that's getting in, so 3 feet, something like that. Pretty much just a mess. Going down to Southern California, we look at the Point Loma South buoy, buoy number 191 off of San Diego there. So we have a mixture of attenuated wind swell and southern hemi swell. You see a bump at 20 seconds. Another bit of energy somewhere between 13 and 16 seconds, and then the wind swell all mixed in. This would be a tough one for the algorithm to pull out, but it does okay. 4.4 feet at 9.3 seconds from the west, 278 degrees. That makes surf at about 4 feet, and there is definitely wind swell working its way into the coast. And then underneath that, the far less consistent southern hemi swell, 1.9 feet at 17.4 seconds from 199 degrees, theoretically making surf at 3 feet, but Well, while Northern California is suffering from northwest winds, Southern California is suffering from south winds, and it's just kind of a mess. So probably not real rideable at most locations. We go over to the north shore of Oahu, the Waimea Bay Buoy, number 106. Not a whole lot going on. The season pretty much winding down. You see little bits and drabs of energy in there, but primary swell 2.2 feet at 8.3 seconds from 145 degrees. So some version of easterly wind swell trying to wrap in there, and then some secondary swell 0.8 feet at 12 seconds from 320 degrees. That's only 1 foot. And the waves, look like they were, thigh high or something this morning, and glassy, but not particularly rideable. So what has been going on for the past week? We will start in the North Pacific. We'll put this into motion. There was a gale that developed over the dateline, producing 30.8 feet seas. These are the highest seas over this entire domain, pretty easy. Oh, you see a little plus sign there? There, the plus sign. So that's the highest seas. If you have multiple high seas areas, it's going to pick the highest one, even if that's not the one aimed at your beach. But in this case, it was. Swell pushed into Hawaii. I think it was on late Thursday, Friday, maybe even a little bit into Saturday. But that's all but gone now. After that, we sort of look and see what happened as the week went on, Wednesday into Thursday, the 1st of May. And you see not a whole lot happening or has happened. And there we are, current time. Things settling down for the North Pacific. The South Pacific, going back to 18Z on Sunday the 27th, the time we made last week's video. Yes, a gale developed under New Zealand with 33-foot seas that built to 35 feet, 36 feet, and then started fading. Notice these little chunks of ice floating out here. Yes, they are real. It is not an anomaly. We're going to get into that in just a second. You see that system faded out, and then boom. Did you see that? Let's do this again. Right in there. There we go, on Wednesday, the 30th of April. And the assumption is, so this ice data gets updated about every 2 days from satellite data. And I was like, this has happened several times this summer. And it's like, well, what's going on? Is that real? Is it not? I've not seen it on the wave models before. My assumption now is that it is real, and that NOAA has upgraded the ice component of the wave model so that it pretty much picks up anything. If a bucket of ice gets dropped in the water down here for whatever reason, it's going to see it if the satellite can pick it up, and then it gets overlaid in the model. Whereas before, I don't think that was a feature of the wave model. So it's actually pretty cool, super high res, something we've not seen before. But then it also goes, well, there's a whole bunch of ice sitting here, and a storm goes over there. All of a sudden, your swell window has been basically polluted or shortened or made smaller, because wind, no matter how hard it blows, basically it's like land here, at least for a short period of time. Now, the other thing I've seen, this happened earlier, a month or so ago, and you all were looking at it. We sort of talked about it. And it kind of tends to break up and dissipate after a week or two or something like that. So this is not a permanent feature. Anyway, so we're into Wednesday, and I'm going to roll through this. You see it actually got bigger. Note it. Here's the other part. So there we went from 0, so 6Z Wednesday, so 12Z Wednesday, boom. It posts, then it then it updated again on Thursday. So that's 24 hours later, a new satellite pass with new data. And then notice 12Z Friday, well, it's starting to break up a little bit. Let's see, did it do anything on 12Z Saturday? No. Minimal, little bit of breakup. So you see, this thing is real. It's updating every 24 hours. And that's a good thing. But the fact that it's there, not so great. Notice a gale starting to develop here off of New Zealand. So, and let's do one other thing. So one of our followers, Another Worldview, picked this up looking at sea surface temperature data. We're looking down here, and this is like between 140 out to the date line. Notice there's ice that was here. This was on the 2nd of May. Let's go to back to the 28th of April, notice there was nothing there. So this is picking up the same ice product, and notice it goes up to 60 south, which is exactly the 60 south line here, going from 140 out to the date line and beyond. So from 140 west, there's the date line, and beyond to a point south of New Zealand, right here, which in my mind pretty much confirms all this is legit, it's real, and it's part of an upgrade in products that NOAA is now incorporating into the wave model, which is amazingly cool, unthinkable 20 years ago or even 15 years ago. And now, oh, we're checking the surf, but we also have real-time tracking or semi-real-time tracking of icebergs and ice breakups and things that are going on here off the Ross ice shelf. So pretty cool technology indeed. Then we head over to the North Atlantic. We'll just run through this, see if there's anything of meaningful value. Yes, a gale did develop off of Greenland, 28-foot seas targeting, Ireland and that area. Maybe the last storm of the season. Also, another little gale here off the Azores, creating some little swell pushing south into Morocco and that area. Then we're into Thursday and Friday, just a couple days ago, and things looking far quieter for the North Atlantic. To the South Atlantic, last Sunday, a gale south of South Africa with 31.4-foot seas. But that was falling southeast. Little bit of sideband swell. Looks like it was trying to radiate up into Africa. That gale continued, sort of redeveloped there, but more in the Indian Ocean and not really targeting Africa that well. And then after that, kind of a quieter pattern set up. And there we are, current time. And then finally, the Indian Ocean. Put this into motion. Not a whole lot was going on the earlier part of the week. Here's that gale that pushed under Africa. Now, it did sort of redevelop and push north towards Australia and Bali with seas in the 35, actually, let's go back a little frame or two because I think we got, right about 35-foot seas. So, and swell from that has already hit as of Saturday Pacific time into Western Australia, and you see the front pushing towards the Bali and that area. So swell on the way there. So let's drill into the South Pacific now. We're going to start looking at the forecast by looking up at Jetstream level winds. These winds of about 30,000 feet help support the formation of gales. When those gales form, help direct their track. We're looking at the Jetstream. These are winds up at about 30,000 feet. What they do when we're looking for a trough, they push into the jet to the north, just like there. And what that helps do is create a counterclockwise flow aloft, high up in the atmosphere, but that also manifests itself down at the ocean surface. If it's strong enough, it creates low pressure there. And low pressure, of course, if it's strong enough, radiating clockwise in the southern hemi, creates winds. As winds get traction on the ocean surface, impart energy to the ocean, and that creates seas. As the seas eventually radiate away from the fetch area, the shorter period elements fade off, exposing longer periods pure swell energy. And that's, of course, what we want in terms of generating surf and rideable waves. So there is a trough here off of New Zealand. We know there's some sort of low pressure and seas developing in this area. The trough, pretty pinched though, but still, apparently it's enough to generate something. Let's put this into motion. Oh, before we do that, now east of there, okay, New Zealand there, date line is right there. Okay, and there's the equator up there, South America here, Australia, New Zealand, Antarctica, the ice anomaly, as we call it, the iceberg, whatever you want to call it, somewhere in this area. All right, so putting this into motion, the trough continues, still very pinched, gets a little bit more energy as we get into Monday, and notice it reaches pretty far to the north, like up to 34 south, something like that. The further north low pressure is, the less distance it has to travel to get to Hawaii and California, so the greater the odds are for swell production. So we get into Tuesday, though, the trough pretty much fades out. Notice a ridge building here over the southeastern Pacific aimed down south, maybe a little bit of a trough here off of Patagonia. That's on Tuesday night. Another ridge pushing south into Tuesday night. But then you get into Wednesday, the 7th of May, and another little trough sets up right in this area. Now, no guarantee you're going to get swell from that, but at least there is a window of opportunity there in the upper atmosphere. And then notice a broader trough setting up in this area as we get into Thursday and Friday, the 9th of May, pushing out of even the Southern California swell window, like San Diego's, 117 or 118 west, something like that. So whatever would form here would mainly be target Mexico down into Central America and South America sort of thing. And then we're out into almost a week from now, Saturday, the 10th of May. Another trough starts developing under New Zealand. But notice winds much weaker here than at the beginning of the model run. Southern Hemi does pretty decent, with 120 knot winds in terms of forming troughs, but this is not even really barely in that category. Still, decent broad trough into 180 hours out, ridge developing over the southeast Pacific a week out from now. So let's go down to the surface and see what sort of actual real fetch is to be generated. It takes winds blowing on the ocean surface to impart energy to the ocean to generate seas. All right, so as of right now, we do have a gale east of the northern island of New Zealand producing 30-knot winds aimed well off to the north. Hawaii is at like 157, 158 west. So up here, those winds aimed directly at the islands. Another gale trying to develop southeast of New Zealand with 30, 35 knot winds. All that fetch is aimed off to the south. There we go. We get into this evening, just really 6 hours from now. 50 to 55 knot winds aimed due north and in the Hawaiian swell window and the California swell window. And I believe well west of the Tahitian swell shadow. Hooray. So we get into Monday, fetch starts fading down to 40 knots. We see other gales lined up, but nothing particularly interesting. The anomaly goes up to 60 south here, so whatever this is, it's pretty much over ice. Something south of New Zealand forecast. Actually, the New Zealand here, I'll pull this thing. There we go. You can still see 40-knot winds even as we get into Monday night. Come on, let's see if we can get that to disappear. There we go. So maybe some more fetch then into Monday night. And then Tuesday, a broader gale sets up, but notice all the wind aims southeast. High pressure here driving that, pushing whatever fetch right into the anomaly. So penguin storm for sure, and additional fetch behind that on Wednesday. You know what, though? The stronger the wind's blowing in this area, maybe that will be good for breaking up that ice field and helping it to dissipate, to clear out the way for anything that might come in behind. And as we get into Friday, another gale tries to set up, only 35-knot winds. And for the most part, those are aimed south. But then we get into Saturday, and here's 40-knot winds under New Zealand, aimed off to the northeast, but kind of fading as they push off to the east. And here we are at the end of the model run. Whatever fetches here, right in the middle of the ice field, doing nothing for us. All right, so what are the effects of those winds on the ocean surface? Well, they are generating 20, 22, 24, 26-foot seas over a small area east of New Zealand at the moment, continuing in the 25 to 26-foot range. Winds supposedly building really quickly Sunday night. Seas jump up to 29 feet to 30, 32, 34, maybe 35 feet. That small fetch aimed well off to the north, free and clear of the islands, theoretically. Continuing, this is actually an upgrade here. Continuing into Monday morning and then fading from there. Here is the anomaly. Watch the fetch as it moves into this area. Now remember, most of it's aimed southeast. Kind of looks like you could be getting sideband swell from this. Certainly Tahiti would see sideband swell from it. About the rest, and maybe into like Chile and Peru, that sort of thing, though very long ways away. That fades off. We're into Saturday, the 10th of May. Another system plows through there, briefly gets 30-foot seas, and it fades out, and then we're done. So it seems like the storm pattern, which has just been incredibly prolific not aimed well to the northeast, but it has been producing steady swell into California, is looking to fade out after this last system in the next day or two over the upper reaches of the Central South Pacific. Heading to the North Pacific, we'll put this in motion. The expectation, not a whole lot going on or forecast. There is a little gale here with 23-foot seas, going just barely south of the North Dateline region. I mean, maybe there's theoretically a chance for 13 or 14 second period sideband swell into Hawaii and maybe the U.S. West Coast. But a pretty good long ways away and probably pretty inconsistent. And there we are at the end of the model run. No big surprise. The North Pacific is going to sleep. North Atlantic, we would expect much the same there, if not already complete slumber setting in. But no, theoretically, a little gale here with 20-foot seas is forecast. Aim mainly south, but still Morocco might get some waves from that. A little bit of activity up in the far north end of the Atlantic, perhaps producing some swell into Ireland for the weekend ahead. That'd be like the 11th of May, and then after that, nothing. To the South Atlantic, where we would expect to see things starting to get more active. A gale does wind up producing 42-foot seas, but also kind of falling more southeast and east than northeast up at the coast. Another little system over in the far side of the South Atlantic pretty much dies before it does anything. Another one after that. I mean, the focus really has been the Pacific. Now, here is a local system. Not big seas in terms of anything that we'd say, swell producing, but very close to the coast. 29-foot, almost 30-foot seas late on Saturday, the 10th of May, building to 30 feet, sweeping off to the east. Sideband swell for sure is possible for South Africa from that. And then the Indian Ocean, we'll put this into motion. Steady, disturbed weather pattern south of southern Australia. Here comes the gale pushing under Africa with 40-plus foot seas, but that fades out. Still tries to get together somewhat over the central South Indian Ocean, but doesn't really do it, and there you go. So really the focus for the moment is more Africa than up into Bali and Australia. Local wind forecast for California, right over here. Hawaii here. High pressure in control, 1030 millibars, ridging up along the coast. Low pressure inland, tightens up the isobars. And on Sunday morning, you see 30 to 35 knot north winds just pushing down the northern California coast. There's San Francisco. There's Central California, Point Conception down there. Just a big wind swell, but a mess. And even those winds pushing into Southern California. Trades 15 knots for the Hawaiian Islands. As we get into Monday, same deal. The gradient finally slacks a little bit, and you get more of a southerly flow. We call it an eddy flow because it's like low pressure forms right here, and it starts pushing south winds up the coast. That's better. And you still have the gradient producing the northwest wind swell. I wish we didn't have any of that so we could just get pure southern hemiswell. Trades 15 knots for the Hawaiian Islands. Tuesday, same sort of deal, the gradient's fading, eddy flow along the California coast, trades 15 knots for the Hawaiian Islands. Wednesday, even the eddy flow breaks down, no fetch. Water temperatures, by the way, dropping significantly. Point Reyes was down at 49 degrees this morning, where it was up at like 53 2 days ago. So, and I expect the cooler water. It'll be interesting to see how far south that upwelling pattern from the northwest winds goes. The eddy flow winds actually, though, draw warmer water to the north. So we'll see how this all plays out. Anyway, Wednesday, gradient fades, 15 knot northwest winds. Trades solid. You get an east wind swell for the Hawaiian Islands. East winds 15 to almost 20 knots. Thursday, same sort of deal. Northwest winds 15 knots for California. Trades backing off 15 knots for the Hawaiian Islands. Friday, things back off yet again. Just generic 15 knot northwest winds. Trades 10 to 15 knots for the Hawaiian Islands. Notice low pressure in the northern Gulf as we get into Saturday. High pressure nosing in behind it. Here comes the gradient again. Northwest winds 20 to 25 knots. Broad fetch of 50-knot winds pushing into the Hawaiian Islands, setting up wind swell. And then on Sunday, look at this, a local backdoor front theoretically. I don't believe it for a second, but the model is showing it. We'll see. Maybe hopes for precipitation into the coast, trades 15 knots for the Hawaiian Islands. Rainfall potential for California. Here we go. California right here, Southern California down here. As of 18Z on Sunday, theoretically showers for Southern California. Any of you that live down there, it'd be interesting to hear whether you actually got some rain or not. Either way, it's all supposed to be clearing out by late Monday morning sort of thing. And then high pressure sets up. Nary a drop of precip forecast. Let's see what happens as we get into the weekend. There's that low off the coast. We're 180 hours out. The odds of this even forming are probably about 3%. And actually for it, if it does form and it coming down the coast and actually producing meaningful rainfall for California, I'd say not at all likely. The snow forecast dashboard for Palisades, Tahoe, formerly Squaw Valley. Oh, look at that. Just a little bit, maybe an inch of snow, probably coming from that low we saw. This model goes out 10 days. The other model only 7. So, maybe. I'm not holding my breath. Let's go look at Mammoth just for laughs. Mammoth forecast to get an inch or 2 of snow. That from the system that's passing over there today, sort of a backdoor trough, low pressure thing. Same thing that's making the gradient and all the northwest winds along the North California coast. But according to this, nothing after that. And this is the freeze level forecast. Now, this data is old. It's from the 1st. I don't know why it hasn't updated. I mean, actually build this chart, I got to download temperature data from every 100 feet going up in the atmosphere up to 14,000 feet, and for multiple days in a row. And oftentimes the data just gets corrupt trying to download that much of it. So then this gets kind of locked up. But the general profile, this would be the summit at Squaw Valley or Palisades, Tahoe at about 9,000 feet, top of Granite Chief. This is the base down in the parking lot, 6,200 feet. Though the white and the gray is the difference between freezing and sleet. And you see, well, here's the 4th, the freeze level nearly to the summit. And as we get into this week, it just gets higher and higher. Things warming up. Freeze level up at 12,000 feet or above by midweek and beyond. So let's go take a look at some forecasts for surf various locations. Start up at the Columbia River. Surf heights fading as we get into Monday in the 2 to 3 foot range, back up into about the 4 to 5 feet range Wednesday, maybe up to 7 feet briefly late Wednesday, and then fading down from there, and again in 4 feet range by next weekend. Probably all this local wind swell, 3 feet at 10 seconds Tuesday, 3 feet at 9 seconds, going up to 4 feet at 11 seconds, up to 5 feet at 12 seconds on Thursday. Then kind of fading from there. So generally wind swell out of the Gulf of Alaska. Ocean Beach, California, all this is wind swell, probably other than a couple of these little dropouts here, which would be southern hemiswell. Theoretically 8 feet on Monday, going down to 5 feet Tuesday, toggling around 4.5 feet Wednesday into Thursday. You can sort of read it for yourself. And you see the wind forecast is 29, 30 knot nuking northwest winds, just kind of a hopeless mess. Swell size, here's the southern hemi. It winds out 1.6 feet at 16 seconds today. As you get into Monday, though, the wind swell just takes over. One reading 1.3 at 14.5 seconds. But then we get into Thursday, Friday. You see a mixture of wind swell, but also southern hemi swell, 1.4 feet, 15 seconds, and a bunch of 1.3 to 1.4s at 14 to 15 to 16 seconds into next weekend. So the southern hemi swell still continuing. Dana Point, all this likely southern hemi swell, surf heights 2.5 to 3 feet for the foreseeable future, maybe fading some next weekend. Swell heights, that's 2 feet at 11 seconds, but here we go, 1.6 feet at 16 seconds, 1.8 feet at 14 seconds, then we get another pulse in on Thursday, 1.6 at 16 seconds, 1.4 to 1.5, fading down to 14, 15 seconds, then things sort of quieting down after that. North Shore of Oahu, pretty quiet until you get into Tuesday, 3.5 foot surf. Then another little pulse of 3.5 foot surf on Wednesday, and kind of holding through the weekend. Let's see if any of that's real. 3 feet at 11 seconds from the northwest, so 330 degrees. So, yeah, rideable waves. Another 3 feet at 12 seconds on Friday, and then dropping down from there. Actually, this is southern hemiswell trying to get in, so South Shore might be a call as well. Jeffreys Bay, South Africa, surf heights, 12 feet. 14 feet steady through Wednesday, Thursday. Now it's probably actually less at Jeffreys Bay till you get into Sunday when that local low just starts trying to wrap up the coast, theoretically surf in the 30-plus foot range. You also see, well, this would be offshore winds at 38 miles an hour or knots. Pretty strong indeed. Let's go look at the swell profile. 8 feet, 11 seconds, 10 feet at 12 seconds, 11 feet at 12, 13 seconds, and then up to 26 feet at 13 to 14 seconds as we get into next weekend. And finally, Bali, surf heights in the 10 to 11 foot range, Tuesday into Wednesday, steadily fading as we go through the work week. Swell heights, 7 feet at 15 to 16 seconds, dropping down 4.5 feet at 14 seconds, 4 feet at 13 seconds, and dropping out into late next weekend. All right, let's go take a look long term. Let's inspect the two major weather oscillations that affect the atmosphere's ability to produce surf. That is the MJO, the Madden-Julian Oscillation, and ENSO, the El Nino Southern Oscillation. We're going to start by looking for signs of the MJO, specifically the active phase of the MJO. There are two phases, the inactive phase and the active phase. Inactive phase is like a high-pressure system. Oh, let's start. The MJO, two phases, the active and inactive. They rotate around the planet west-east over the equator. When the active phase moves into the West Pacific, because it is like a low-pressure system, it takes warm, moist air at the ocean surface, lifts it aloft, that gets caught in the jet stream, energizes the jet stream, makes it stronger, and a stronger jet stream is better at digging out troughs, and troughs, of course, are good for making storms, gales, and producing surf. Inactive phase, exact opposite thing. It's a high-pressure system. It produces falling air that cuts off the flow of energy to the jet stream. The jet stream gets weak and splits and doesn't support gale development. If anything, it supports high-pressure development, and a high pressure is good for producing trades. The active phase of the MJO, likewise, because it's a low-pressure system, it sort of cuts the legs out of trades, and trades get weaker than normal. All right, so we're looking at data from the TAA buoy array, a series of buoys strung across the equator used for monitoring El Nino. This would be the East Pacific here. This is the West Pacific here. That's New Guinea there. There's the date line there, and this is somewhere near the Galapagos Islands. Major update. Notice there is a whole bunch of data here that wasn't here 2 weeks before, or for maybe a year or two, or 3 or 4 before that. They are in the process of, another NOAA project that is in development and being implemented. They're in the process of upgrading the buoys there in the East Equatorial Pacific. This is very good news. The last section of the array remaining here is here in the far West Pacific. I'm sure they'll get there at some time, but right now, this is probably a bit more important because when Kelvin waves push into this area, you want to be able to, 1, see what the winds are doing, and 2, see what the water temps are doing. All right, so we're looking, this is actual wind speeds, 5-day average winds, East Pacific here, West Pacific here, equator there, date line there, New Guinea there. The length of the arrows gives you a rough idea what the wind speeds are doing, just a rough idea. So trade's pretty strong out of the east right here. And then you get here into sort of the East Central Pacific, kind of modest trades. Same thing over the Central Pacific, same thing over the West Pacific. But it's not the actual wind speeds that matter. It's the difference from normal for this time of year. And yes, you see trades pretty strong here on the very edge of the image, but as soon as you get 1 inch away from it, trades go dead normal. Not slack, just completely normal for this time of year. Not stronger, not weaker than normal. Same thing over the Central Pacific, same thing over the West Pacific. So if you were having a active phase of the MJO, you'd think trades would almost see that one little arrow out of the west. You'd see a little bit more tendency of that. If the inactive phase was in control, you'd see a lot more of like this. So this almost looks like inactive phase exiting the East Pacific and maybe active phase trying to work its way into the West Pacific. Let's dig a little deeper. 850 millibar zonal wind anomalies for the whole planet. This is up 850 millibars, that's up about 4,700 feet, but a good proxy for what's going on at the surface. Blues, easterly anomalies. Think of that roughly as the inactive phase. Oranges and reds, westerly anomalies, active phase. Now, let's get ourselves oriented. This is the whole planet on one chart, so the date line runs right up the middle here. And I'll keep the scale, if I can get it centered here, right in there. We go. Okay. So the date line right there, far west Pacific starts 125 east, so right about there. So here we are today, easterly anomalies over most of what I call the Kelvin wave generation area, the West Pacific. That's the really important part where, or place where when the active phase moves over that, it feeds energy to the jet stream because it's moving into open ocean or over open ocean. There's a lot of warm water over there. That gets sucked up into the jet stream, feeds the jet stream both north and southern hemi, and helps produce storm production. You can see we've had easterly anomalies here, courtesy of La Nina for forever, all winter long, basically. And as of today, I mean, look at this. Westerly anomalies tried to make a little incursion into the West Pacific. They backed off for about 5 days, but give it a day or two. And then easterly anomalies, for the most part, are to completely exit the Kelvin wave generation area pretty much for the foreseeable future. With westerly anomalies, this is your really, these easterly anomalies are your La Nina signal. This is your El Nino signal. Now, I'm not saying El Nino is coming, but just the tendency to it, the general tendency for westerly anomalies moving into the West Pacific and holding for at least the next 2 weeks. Let's dig deeper. Forecast going out 2 weeks for outgoing long wave radiation. Just fancy words for cloud cover. If you have the active phase over the MJO, it takes warm, moist air, lifts it aloft. That warm, moist air eventually hits the upper atmosphere, condenses. Because the MJO is sort of a long-lasting weather pattern, not like a thunderstorm, but it lasts for weeks over a particular area of the ocean, then you'll get more clouds, and on average, it'll be cloudier over that part of the planet. Inactive phase, the exact opposite. High pressure, cloud-free skies. So the oranges are cloud-free skies, the blues cloudy skies. South America, Central America, Hawaii, New Guinea there, Philippines. There's the equator right there. There's the date line right there. So this looks like inactive phase, not good for storm production. This is a statistic model. Building over the West Pacific 5 days from now, continuing 10 days and 15 days from now, where the active phase builds in the Indian Ocean. Now, the dynamic model paints a little bit different picture. Yes, they agree starting today, but then things go completely neutral 5 days from now. Active phase sets up in the West Pacific 10 days from now and fades. So more of a neutral pattern, let's call it, where the statistic model says inactive phase dominating. Let's go look at the phase diagrams for these two models. All right, so here's the statistic model, here's the dynamic model. How do you read the chart? Well, the MJO moves from west-east, from the Indian, over the equator, from the Indian Ocean to the Maritime Continent, West Pacific, East Pacific, under the United States, over the Atlantic, over Africa, back to the Indian Ocean. Heavy dot is where the active phase is, so over Africa, the closer the dot is to this circle, the weaker it is. So a weak active phase, and then there's 1, 2, 3 different paths or members forecast in this model. They all generally suggest inactive phase building over the Indian Ocean 2 weeks from now. Dynamic model, though, has, boom, active phase quickly traversing and ending up back in the West Pacific at weak status 2 weeks from now. So two basically complete polar opposite forecasts. And then to make things even more confusing, another statistic model, upper level model, showing areas favorable for precipitation. That's the green. The oranges would be dry air, so active phase, inactive phase. And there's South America, Central America, and New Guinea there. 0 is the equator, date line running roughly down here. Each panel 5 days, going out 40 days. This suggests, as it has for weeks and weeks and weeks now, I mean, I think the issue is the MJO is moving incredibly slow and it's weak, and all the models are struggling to keep up with what's going on, or trying to figure out what's going on. It certainly isn't following a normal pattern, but active phase over New Guinea, slowly working its way into the Pacific on the 9th of May. You see it working its way and pretty much out of the West Pacific as we get to the end of the month, the 29th of May, as the inactive phase starts moving in. And then the inactive phase in control for June. 2 months ago, May was supposed to be completely locked down by this inactive phase, and it's just been stalled and stalled and stalled. So we're still really waiting for the active phase to make its transit across the Pacific. But we have some data, other data. Yes, you can't just look at one thing and go, I know what's going on. We have other data, and we'll get into that suggests, well, this actually is happening somewhat like what is suggested here. Let's keep going. Next up, the CFS model, 850 millibar zonal wind anomalies. All right, oops, and there we go. Date line running right there. This is the east-west component of the wind over the whole planet. All I care about is the West Pacific. That's the only thing that matters. Date line to the far entrance to the West Pacific, 125 east, so right there. Past performances here, you see the blues, easterly anomalies, preponderance of easterly anomalies. The black contour MJO, that was the active phase, the dotted inactive phase. Last real one of either of these we had was somewhere in late March. The MJO, very quiet since then. You still see easterly anomalies forecast. Now this shows for the next 2 weeks, easterly anomalies over the Kelvin wave generation area with westerly anomalies building in the far West Pacific, trying to make inroads, and then eventually 3 weeks from now, easterly anomalies completely die. Most of this is all being driven by the fading remnants of La Nina. You see how strong the easterly and the dark shades of blue getting steadily weaker, maybe one little pulse there, and after that, it's just gone. So La Nina is already effectively gone. And then the same model, CFS model, but this goes out 3 months. Past performance at the bottom, the future up here. You see, the date line runs right up the middle. Blues, easterly anomalies, and this shows now easterly anomalies hanging on for maybe another day or two, and then pretty much making it to the date line, and not even a week from now, 5 days from now, they're completely gone. Westerly anomalies take over, and westerly anomalies in control for the foreseeable future. Hooray! Even if we just had the white here instead of the yellow, if it was just neutral, that would be good enough for me. All this, the yellow is a bonus. We'll overlay the MJO here. You see the real weakness of the MJO. One contour, active phase, barely in control. Sort of is to fade, but then it's still hanging on. I consider this all to be basically one event. And then you have this inactive phase. But the interesting part about this, even though it's inactive, notice westerly anomalies persisting. So something else is taking control, and it is not the MJO. And then you see out here, so somewhere in mid-June, June 10th or so, 13th, another active phase sets up, westerly anomalies build, and westerly anomalies come in complete control of the entire Western Pacific. So here's the real teller of what's going on. The dotted contour, high pressure bias, the La Nina signal. La Nina with 1, 2, 3 contours. Third contour died last week. Second contour fading. It's supposed to hang on till the end of March, but effectively it's getting steadily weaker. And when it does, you reach some threshold where then the trades kind of, the high pressure bias is feeding trades. As it gets weaker, then westerly anomalies, or at least neutral anomalies, creep in, and then it collapses. The low pressure bias, this is the El Nino signal, right, this easternmost contour just hanging right at the entrance to the West Pacific, and then somewhere around June 10th pushes into the West Pacific, and after that, then we're off to the races, theoretically. So what is going on down in the ocean? All right, the balance of warm and cold waters east to west gives us some indication. If trades are stronger than normal and we're in La Nina, trades would take warm water in the East Pacific, ball them all up in the West Pacific. Also note, we have bunches of data down here now again too. So the buoy array getting more complete. Just give us this last little sector here and we'll be really in business. Anyway, all right. The 29-degree isotherm, which has been gone for months because driven by stronger than normal easterly trades, pushing it into the far West Pacific, is showing up, actually growing. I think it was, I don't know, 170 maybe last week. It's now to 175 east. 28-degree isotherm also creeping off to the east, again suggesting trades are not as strong as normal in this area, reaching to about 164 west, something like that. The 24-degree isotherm steady at 25 meters deep in the east. But that is just the temperatures. It's not the actual temperatures. It is the anomaly, difference from normal for this time of year. And you see no longer any cold water at all in the upper reaches of the Pacific, from the East Pacific the whole way to the West Pacific. Plus 2-degree anomalies in the West Pacific, plus 1 in the East. Yes, there is this pocket of 1 to barely 2 degree below normal temperatures, but it is deep in the ocean and it is getting steadily weaker according to this data. We have another view of the same thing, West Pacific here, East Pacific here, but not only do we have, it's been using the buoys, but also satellite data to help understand what's going on in the ocean. We'll get that into that in a minute, but you see broad expanse of warmer than normal temperatures building in the west, and it really looks like a Kelvin wave. That is a push of warm water pushing the whole way across the Pacific. Not sure, because there are these little bits of breaks here, but of probably more interest is before this whole area here was full of cold water. Now you get fingers of warm water reaching up, and the expanse of the coolest of cool waters. I mean, this updates every 5 days. It takes that long for a polar orbiting satellite to cover the entire planet. But steadily, temperatures are getting warmer here, indicating the death of La Nina. Here's the satellite data, Pentad sea level anomalies. Polar orbiting satellite rotating around the planet, beams a radar beam down. It measures the amount of time it takes to get back to the surface. The quicker it returns, that indicates seas are higher, or the ocean is higher for some reason. If it takes longer, the exact opposite true. This chart here, though, is not telling us sea heights. In fact, you can take and strip the sea heights away, the tides away, the wind waves away, and you get to see the sphere of the ocean. Is it higher or lower than normal? Why does that matter? If you have cold water at depth, cold water contracts. You'll get a divot on the ocean surface. Warm water at depth expands. It displaces water up above it. So here's the equator right here. That would be Ecuador, Galapagos Islands there. There's the date line right there, New Guinea there. All that matters, 5 degrees north and south of the equator. You see pretty much neutral. Zero is somewhere between orange and light or yellow and light, baby blue. And so you see pretty much normal sea heights across here, inferring not cold water, not warm water at depth. And so that's what's playing into that previous chart we were looking at. Of course, you see all the warm water here. You do see these two last lobes here and here of a cooler than normal waters, just barely in that region from 5 degrees to 5 degrees north to south. The expectation at some point, as east anomalies fade on the date line, these areas too will fade. Upper ocean heat anomalies for the past year. I love this chart because it puts everything in perspective. You can see this is the West Pacific here, East Pacific here. This is just like 2 degrees or 5 degrees north and south of the equator. You can see the La Nina cool signature here in the East Pacific a year ago with all warm water balled up in the west. You see that warm water pattern continuing to build up until today. You see the cool water pattern in the east has completely collapsed. You see warm water pouring over, at least it gives the impression that it's pouring over the equator like a Kelvin wave and starting to bunch up here off the Ecuador coast. Well, that's probably not the case, and more likely it's just trade winds are dying, allowing the sun to beat on the ocean surface and start warming it up, and just gives you this gentle, light warming in this area. Any way I can get warming, I'll take it, because what that does is the warmer the ocean temperatures, the more evaporation you get off it. More evaporation supports low pressure development, which doesn't support trade wind development, which then starts a cycle of, just generally supporting a more favorable environment for storm production up at the jet stream level. But it all has its fundamentals here down at the ocean surface. Sea surface temperature anomalies. All right, more good news here. South America, Central America, New Guinea, equator right there, date line right there. Warm anomalies, yes, off of Ecuador, but really the Nino 3.4 region, the area on the equator, 5 degrees north and south of the equator, from 120 west out to 170 west. This is sort of the official area they use for monitoring development of La Nina or El Nino. We see a couple little pockets of blue, but either neutral or slightly warmer temperatures over most of this area, suggesting ENSO neutral is finally taking root. Yes, you see blues here. That's all upwelling. High, the strong northwest winds nuking down the California coast. That is because we have high pressure right here. And that pushes the cool, or creates upwelling down around into here, but not down into the equator. This is kind of a normal seasonal thing. This here is part of a longer term trend away from La Nina to ENSO neutral. I say that, but then I also remember the planet's oceans are getting warmer. So NOAA is looking at alternate strategies to try to say, well, okay, if the oceans are getting warmer, how do I determine what's El Nino and what's La Nina, since water temperatures are a major component of determining El Nino? So this chart takes it a different way. The previous chart was sort of looking at long-term historical average temperatures for 30 years over every basically square mile of the ocean surface. What this does is just say, okay, today, if I sum up all the temperature across all the planet's oceans and just average them out and say, okay, the average temperature is X. And then for each grid square on this chart, how do these temperatures, how do they deviate from that average? And this suggests kind of still this cooler than normal signature here. So let's go back. This shows warming temperatures, right? Polluted some by a warming planet signal, where this shows still kind of a cool pattern setting up. That said, I don't know how long this chart's been around, maybe a couple of years at best, whereas the previous chart has decades of use and knowledge and understanding behind it. But still, this is a counterpoint just to sort of, use to compare. Sea surface temperature trend for the past 7 days. Ecuador here, Galapagos Islands there. Again, 5 degrees north and south of the equator. You see, a little bit of cooling off the Galapagos and a little bit south of the equator, while it's warming a little bit north of the equator, and then all warming out here. Official El Nino region starts here and goes out to about here. So all in all, just eyeballing it, kind of looks like a wash to me. It's not cooling, not really warming, just steady state, which is okay for now. Sea surface temperature trend right up there along the Galapagos Islands and Ecuador. Today's value, we are 37 thousandths of a degree above neutral. And we've only been neutral for, we'll say 2 weeks. We were actually above it for months behind that. I mean, the East Pacific has been steadily warming since February. And we've had a little cool down recently, but neutral for now. The official El Nino monitoring region, the Nino 3.4 region, we're still trying to dig ourselves out of La Nina here. We had a little spike back in the early part of March, but still you see the general upward trend. Today's value, let's see if we can get it, 53 thousandths of a degree below normal. So basically dead neutral. And the reality is half a degree above to half a degree below is considered neutral. We've been effectively neutral since the end of February. And what we're doing is slowly solidifying that trend or that position of just dead neutral. Not warming a whole lot, but just getting back to normal. It's a slow process. The official record from NOAA right here. This is the Nino 3.4 region for the week ending the week of April 23rd, has temperatures at 0.0 degrees, as neutral as one can be. So what does the atmosphere think is going on? Well, we look at the Southern Oscillation Index, difference in pressure between Darwin, Australia, and the Indian Ocean, Tahiti, on the equator in the Pacific Ocean. When pressure is lower over Tahiti, the index goes negative. Hey, we're negative, minus 2.97. And actually, look at this. For the past, effectively, 12 days, we've been negative. To me, and where were we a month ago? Well, we were sort of pinging around, but mainly positive. This smells to me of inactive phase of the MJO, higher pressure over the West Pacific, now moving towards lower pressure over the West Pacific. The 30-day average, I'll get my head out of the way there. 30-day average, you can really help see the trends in El Nino, La Nina. Today's value, 0.40, basically neutral. Where were we a month ago? Well, we were 10. We went up a little bit higher, and now we're falling. Again, supporting the thesis that active phase of the MJO is building over the West Pacific. 90-day average, this is your La Nina, El Nina indicator, 5.39. According to the Bureau of Meteorology Australia, +7 to -7 is considered neutral, so that's neutral. Where were we a month ago? Well, we were rising. Now we're falling again. So maybe heading deeper into neutral territory. Here is the graph of the 30-day average. You see it going down. 0 is right there. Effectively 0 as of today. The 90-day average, again, this is your El Nino, La Nina indicator, still kind of neutral, but falling towards closer to neutral. Outgoing long wave radiation anomalies from 5 north to 5 south, okay? This is kind of key. The oranges and red, clear skies, high pressure. That's the date line right there. This is the whole planet. West Pacific, 125 west. So this suggests that since September, we have been under the influence of high pressure over the date line. That would be La Nina. And as of now, that is gone. And also notice the building of cloudier than normal skies in the far West Pacific. It started in late January and continues to build and is trying to ease its way towards the date line. As La Nina fades, we are hoping to see more instances of the blue pockets build in this area over the West Pacific. We will see how strong it actually gets, though. The forecast for sea surface temperatures for the Nino 3.4 region, that is the official El Nino monitoring region in the Pacific, from the CFS version 2 model. Well, today, where are we? Somewhere April 15th, that would be here. Was that a 1/10 of a degree below normal? Heading to dead neutral as we get into May. We're 10 days away from May 15th. Theoretically going up a 1/10 of a degree, but you get the idea. 1/10 bouncing around either way. That's as neutral can get, and it's supposed to hold into December and then maybe start heading up from there. But this generally suggests we're moving towards a neutral pattern for the summer and fall months. So as of right now, gale activity still continuing under New Zealand. Ice anomaly, a bit of a problem there. It's not really an anomaly. It's a iceberg breakup pattern in control there. Still really impressive to even be able to see that and visualize and be able to, sort of put that into the equation. I don't think it's going to be the end all of our summer pattern or anything. I think that'll all blow out of here in a week or two. And then we'll be back to a more normal setup. That said, the one more storm forecast or gale pushing northeast of New Zealand We'll produce yet more swell, taking about a week to get up to Hawaii and maybe 8 days into California, something like that, really pushing way to the north. And then after that, it looks like things take a break for a little bit. So surf while you can, make the most of it, and then it's probably going to be back to work or school or whatever you're doing, and take care of business for a while till the next series of storms set up, though it kind of smells like the active phase of the MJO is trying to move into the West Pacific, which at some point should mean that we should get another pulse of storms developing, probably under New Zealand. But the models, the MJO looks pretty weak and not certain and not sure of exactly what it's doing. Looking further out, though, it appears that La Nina is already dead, completely dead, and we're just looking for something more. Westerly anomalies building over the Kelvin wave generation area would be a good thing to help goose up the jet stream and then start the storm track or the storm cycle again to start up and producing swell. But for right now, looking really long term, it looks like ENSO neutral, which is good, neither good nor bad. That is, it's not going to amplify storms, make more surf than normal, but it's certainly not going to suppress it either. And if anything, if the models are right, it seems like we're going to move as we get into the mid to late summer, probably a more favorable pattern for storm development as compared to average. So spring unpredictability barrier, all this is kind of a guess. It's not till you get to June 1st that you're out of the spring unpredictability barrier. The models have a hard time during spring knowing what's going to go on. So, but all that said, things are looking, even with that unpredictability there, generally trending more favorable than not. So looks like things are going to be doing okay for us this year. All right, that's the video for this week. If you enjoyed it, give us a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Click the Stormsurf icon down the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Get yourself signed up to get notifications when the videos are posted. Comments, questions, write them up down below. Be happy to reply. And if you would like to make a small contribution to the cause, you may hit the super thanks button down below, the heart with the $sign in it. With that, we are done for this week. We'll do it again next week. Same time, same channel. Thanks so much for watching.